this is an interesting case. Is the Lord really equal to everyone? I mean, Krishna says in the Gita, I am equal to everyone. And Yayatam mam prabhidante, as you surrender unto me, I reward you accordingly. In many places, Krishna talks about this equality to everyone. Now, sometimes there's a war. And in the war, there are two sides fighting. The well-known example is in World War I. Now, World War I was a particularly nasty war. The one side led by the Germans, the other side the French and British and others, and they had a line, and there were trenches on either side of the line. And for years, the soldiers fought in these trenches. And then, does anybody know in World War I what method of warfare used that was regularly universally banned?
Gas. Poison gas.
Yeah. So they would lob shells of poisonous gas. And the poisonous gas was so bad, it would burn the lungs, mustard gas. And it was so bad that everyone decided, even when fighting, we're not going to use it. And for the most part, since that time, with some exceptions in Syria, poisonous gas has rarely been used in warfare, though people are killing each other because it was so nasty. And you die the slow, horrible death as your lungs slowly collapse. So World War I was a particularly nasty war, and both sides for years were in these trenches. And then what was the wartime invention that happened in World War I that was never used in any war before that? Somebody know? A wartime invention. It's easy, really easy.
It's open now.
The tank.
Nope. They had even rudimentary tanks in the American Civil War.
Airplane?
Yes, the airplane. Because the Wright brothers had gotten beyond their bicycle shop and made an airplane. And you had the first airplanes used in warfare where they would bomb each other and shoot each other. When they first started shooting, when they first mounted the gun for the pilot to shoot, they ran into a problem. And that was the gun shot the propeller off. That really happened. So then they had to invent a gun that shoots the bullets between the propeller turns. And they did that, but it was a very nasty war. Now, in that war, the histories of the war talk about a phenomenon that happened. Both sides were fairly religious at that time. The Germans were mostly Lutherans and Catholics, and the British were Protestant and Catholics, and the French were Catholics. So all sides were in the trenches, and they're in these horrible trenches for years. Their bodies are covered with all kinds of mold and all horrible things you get living in a trench all year round. It was, you didn't exactly take a bath every day or every week or every month, maybe not every year. It was a terrible time. And the only break was Christmas time. And Christmas time, in certain parts of World War I, they declared a truce. And both sides came out and sang Christmas carols together, opposite sides. Kind of like what happened in the Battle of Kurukshetra. At night, the opposite sides would come out and play chess together and then go back and fight the next day to kill themselves. So that actually happened in World War I in certain places. Christmas, they started singing one side, the other. They hung up white flags of truce. They came out and they actually had some sang Christmas carols together. But for the most part, it was this most miserable of existence. And so many people injured, and there was very little medicine. There was no antibiotics then. If somebody had their leg was smashed with a bullet, the only choice was to cut it off. There was very little modern medicine that didn't come out. Most of that didn't happen until World War II. Very miserable condition. So when people were in the trenches day after day after day, what were they doing? What was the thoughts in their minds? This is written up quite a bit.
But there are no atheists in the trenches.
Yes, there were no atheists. Each side was praying, my dear Lord, please let us be victorious. Now, only one side could be victorious because there was a winner and a loser. As you all know, it went on for years. Then America entered the war. And they sang that very famous song by George M. Cohan, "The Yanks Are Coming." And the Americans entered the war, and they were fresh soldiers and enthusiastic, and the war ended. Now, we're going to talk about the end of the war because it's very relevant for this chapter. I'm trying to relate what goes on in the Bhagavatam to our modern history. That's what I'm attempting to do in this class. So now, when they were in the trenches, what were a lot of the soldiers doing during the day? What would you be doing if you were in a trench and people were throwing bombs and mustard gas at you? What would you be doing? You can unmute and tell me.
Praying.
Yeah, Radhika, what do you say?
Praying.
Praying, yes. Now, here's my dilemma. Both sides were praying. Remember, I just said one side was Catholics and Protestants, mostly Lutheran. The other side were Catholics and other kinds of Protestants, not Lutheran. And so both sides were praying. And then when the Americans came, and the British also had a Jewish troop, probably there were Muslim troops too among the remnants of the British Empire. So you had all these religious people. And they say, as Adi said, there's no atheists in a foxhole or a trench. So everyone there is praying. And each side is praying, my dear Lord, please let me be the winner. Let me win. I want to win this. Each side is praying and praying, but only one side wins. World War II, same thing. But I'm focusing on World War I for now. We'll leave it with one war. But every war is like it. Now, my question to you is, what went wrong here? Both sides had surrendered to God, and one side won and one side lost. What did I miss here? I thought if you surrender to God, you get what you want. You know, you surrender, you get what you want, and this didn't seem to work right. Something's wrong here. Can someone help me out? If you don't help me out, by the end of this class, I'll be an atheist. This is not very good. Well, we got 30 minutes to prevent me from becoming an atheist. So please help me.
One thought that occurs is, the winning is not necessarily by material calculations. Maybe the winning has more to do with your relationship with God. How much closer do you come to Him through that experience?
I think what you're saying is philosophically correct, but let me add, the people in there were each praying very sincerely. I mean, if there is bombs over your head, planes dropping bombs, mustard gas, if you put your head above the trench, it gets shot off. There was one famous battle in the Civil War where Stonewall Jackson, the famous and somewhat nasty Southern general, raised his hand one time to yell charge, and his hand got shot.
Oh, wow.
You couldn't even raise your hand. So every side is praying pretty sincerely. So what's the defect here? In this chapter, the next part we go to is Bali uh, Maharaj. He goes off to his fate and his special planet, but Sukacharya is being taken to task. Why did you give Bali Maharaj such bad advice that he shouldn't surrender to Vishnu? So in this case here, we have each side is praying and praying, but something's wrong. What's the defect? Yes, Radhika.
Is it the intent?
Yeah, some intent has a lot to do with it. When I first lived in India, I wasn't a devotee, but I went there trying to understand the Gita. And I was a itinerant high school teacher in the state of Bihar, which is kind of like being in the Bronx, you might say. Except the Bronx is better. So, and I would visit wherever I was. I'd go to the religious institutions. So what would it be? It'd be a Hindu temple. There were a lot of Christians where I was, or even mosques. So I'd go to all of them. And I would ask in my faltering Hindi, why are you here? For what reason have you come? And what was the most common reason I was given? What do you think? What reason did people give me? Why were you there? It was always the same reason.
We're asking for their desire to be fulfilled.
Yeah, they wanted something material, money, dowry, my enemy be killed, my kids pass his exam, the fellow who's, when the high school I was assigned to, a very rural, primitive school, it was a boys' school, and the urinal was just like some rocks with a little piece of canvas in front of it. So during the exam, people could leave to pass water. And while they were out there passing water, the relatives would come up and they would ask them, and the relatives would try to give them answers to their questions. They had all kinds of books with them. It was blatant cheating going on right in front of everybody. But if somebody would challenge the proctor, they'd beat the proctor up. So it was that kind of weird situation. Now, but before the exam, everyone was praying to pass. And then during the exam, almost everyone was cheating. So what's going on here? What defect are we talking about? Well, the defect is this. People are praying for something material. They want something. They're not engaged in devotional service. Now, what does Krishna say about that in the Gita? It's curious. What does Krishna say?
One thing is, let not the wise disrupt the minds of the ignorant who attach to fruitive work. They should not be encouraged to refrain from work, but to engage in work in a spirit of devotion.
They're saying that, but what else? What else is Krishna's? What else does Krishna say?
The problem is that the results are temporary, isn't it?
Krishna says that, but he says something to the opposite. He says 4 kinds of people approach me. And the best are those who are wise. Next is curious. And then those who have some material need. And finally, those who are in distress, like in a foxhole or in a trench fighting. All 4 kinds that approach Krishna are considered pious. So it's always good to approach Krishna. But if you're approaching Krishna just for your material needs, yes, eventually your needs will be fulfilled this life, next life. We don't quite know when. It's always auspicious to approach Krishna, but it's not the best way to approach Krishna. For that, I'll tell you a story. Now, all of you know our dear Tulsi Rani. I don't see her here today, but let me look. Is Tulsi Rani here today? No Tulsi Rani today. Nope. Okay.
Rupa Chandra Prabhu is here. Maybe.
Is he? Rupa Chandra, if you're here, let me see your wonderful new mustache. Okay, I don't see Rupa Chandra. Okay, that's fine. He may be busy. He is a professor now. So, Rupa Chandra looks so distinguished nowadays. Looks like a real professor. So Rupa Chandra and Tulsi Rani got married some years ago. And they got married maybe 4 years ago, if I remember. They got married at New Raman Reti. Does anybody know who was this is a trick question. Who is the priest who did their wedding? Does anybody know? Anybody know? Let me give you a guess. You're looking at him. Okay, now that's a hint. Now, I was asked to be the co-priest for the wedding. I use the word priest in quotes. You'll find out why in a minute. This is a very important story that's related to this verse. I was asked to be the co-priest, along with Chadaratma. Tulsi Rani comes from a Jewish family. She had promised her late father something like she would get a Jewish wedding, and she wanted to please her mother, and she also wanted to do our so-called Vedic wedding. So-called, I'll get to that in a minute. And so she wanted to do both. So we did a wedding with myself doing the Jewish side and Chadaratma doing the so-called Vedic side. Here's a picture at New Raman Reti of me doing the wedding in my rabbinical outfit. So here's another picture I'll show you. Here's a picture of the wedding party. There's Tulsi Rani and Rupa Chandra and the wedding party. And next to me is Tulsi Rani's mother. And you can see, and Chadaratma is, I have him in a different picture. I didn't pull that one up. So we did the wedding. And in order to do the wedding.
We didn't see it. Oh, now we see. Okay.
Say again?
We weren't seeing the picture for most of the time that you were speaking about. Can you show it again?
Oh, yeah, of course. No, sorry about that. Here it is. Let me try it again. Can you see it now?
No. Okay, now yes. Now yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Who is next to Rupa?
I forgot.
Okay, okay.
But I did forget that now.
Okay.
And then, okay, so you see, it's kind of a Vedic Jewish wedding. And I studied real hard before doing this wedding because I wanted to do it right. Rupa Chandra and Tulsi Rani were very dear to me. It's an honor they asked me to do it. And I wanted to please Tulsi Rani's mother with doing the Jewish side. She was very happy. But I studied for the wedding. And then I did the Jewish wedding the best I could. And Chadaratma did the wedding we normally do in temples, the Hindu style wedding. I wouldn't necessarily say it's Vedic, just what the rituals we do. And I was shocked by what I discovered, absolutely shocked. Can anybody guess what I might have discovered in comparing the two kinds of weddings? Each of them had 7 steps in it, but they were night and day, opposite. What did I discover? Anybody guess? what I discovered is in the so-called Vedic wedding, everything, the 7 blessings were all, what can God do for me? God, what can you do for me? God, do something for me. We want to be blessed with so many children and a nice house, and I want this blessing, that blessing. All these blessings were there. And then on the Jewish side, it was the opposite. God, what can I do for you? The 7 things I can do for God now that I'm married. I can have children that are God conscious. I can do this. And then right when the wedding was over, the minute it was over, I had to run to the airport. I couldn't even stay for the prasadam because I had to take a flight to New York for a Bhakti Center board meeting. So then I immediately race to the airport and I fly into New York and I get to the temple. And when I get to the temple, I run into Radhanath Swami. And he said, Brahma, he had already heard what I had done. I heard you were the rabbi at my disciple's wedding. I said, yes, Maharaj. And I said, Maharaj, I'm bewildered. I'm very bewildered. I said, I studied very hard to get this wedding right. And the Jewish side, I actually liked. And the so-called Vedic side, I didn't like at all. One side was asking, what can I do for God? And the other side was asking, what can God do for me? It was like, paraphrasing that famous line by John F. Kennedy, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. That very famous line from his inauguration speech. I mean, everyone in America knows that line, if you were alive then or not. And this wedding, the Hindu side was, ask God, what can you do for me? And the Jewish side asked, what can I do for you? And I said, I got bewildered because me being brought up Jewish, most of it was, in fact, karma kanda. So then Maharaj gave me words of wisdom. Would you like to hear the words of wisdom? Here were his words of wisdom when I said that. He said, yes, the weddings we do are karma kanda. Now, what does karma kanda mean? Can someone help me? Can anybody tell me what karma kanda is?
It's when you follow Vedic rituals for the sake of getting some material enjoyment.
Well put. Well put. He said, yes, the weddings we do are karma kanda. And this is karma kanda rituals. And he said, in this case, though the Jewish side does tons of karma kanda, in this case, the ceremony was a little better than that. It was very informative to me. So this takes us back to the trenches of World War I. Everyone is praying in the mood of karma kanda. What can you do for me? What can you do for me? Please save me. That's good. Krishna says, better you approach. It's the 4th class way to do it. 1st class way is out of wisdom. But all of those who approach Krishna are considered pious. So better they pray. But these people have their karma and their karma kanda. And therefore, somebody is praying for victory and they get it, and somebody is praying for victory and they lose. And typically, they're not very wise. They're praying for the wrong reasons. And the danger is they'll become atheists. But if you're praying to the Supreme Lord for devotional service, you're praying, oh, Krishna, what can I do for you? There never can be a loss in that endeavor. You win or lose, you always win because you come closer to me. Prabhupada gives the example, like it's raining. And when it rains on the rocks, the rain doesn't do much good. When it rains on the vegetables, they grow very well. So Krishna is always giving his mercy to all of us. It's always there, but then some of us take it and some of us don't. And the way we take it, the way we actually take it is to not be in the mood of karma kanda, but it's the mood of devotion. So now we jump ahead towards the end of the chapter. And I'm jumping ahead. whenever the activities of Vamandev are described in the course of a ritualistic ceremony, whether the ceremony be performed to please the demigods, to please one's forefathers, or to celebrate social events like a marriage, that ceremony should be understood to be extremely auspicious. And in the purport, Prabhupada says there are three kinds of ceremonies, specifically ceremonies to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead or the demigods. And sometimes they're performed for social celebrations like marriages and birthdays. Sometimes to please the forefathers, like the Shraddha ceremony for those who have passed on. Large amounts of money are spent. But here it is suggested that if along with this, there was a recitation of the wonderful activities of Vamandev, the ceremony will be carried out successfully and free of all discrepancies. So what we're saying is, even if there's a discrepancy, even if we're engaged in karma kanda, if we can dovetail that by remembering what Vamandev did here and remembering the activities of Vamandev, we will rise above the chains of karma kanda and become liberated. And what Sukadev, the instruction, Sukadev Goswami, of course, is narrating the story, and the instructions that were given to Sukacharya is that what he's missed. He was giving them various karma kanda instructions, telling them that took him away from worshiping Vishnu. The discrepancy was all he had to do was give the same instructions, but put it in relation to Vishnu, and then he would not have advised Bali Maharaj to reject Vamandev. That's kind of the lessons that are being taught herein. I hope all of this little complex makes sense. I'm going to pause here to see if there are any questions, comments, or reflections. But again, to summarize, this shows how powerful it is to hear about the activities of Supreme Personality of Godhead, that even in karma kanda activities, even in those activities that are done for our material elevation, if we can connect it with the holy name of Krishna or connect it with the pastimes of Krishna, those very same activities that can bind us can liberate us. And how easy Krishna consciousness is, because all you have to do is simply add Krishna. And then no matter what your circumstances are, it becomes so auspicious. And that's really the lesson that's being taught here. With that, I will pause here to see if there are questions, comments, reflections, or if somebody wants to get remarried in a Jewish ceremony.
Prabhu, we try to remember that the Bhagavatam is about glorifying the Lord. And so although you already have, just to be specific, we say, how wonderful is Krishna? How wonderful is Krishna? That even if we don't approach him in the perfect way, he takes us from the position we're in and brings us forward to the point where we can actually have our real nature as loving beings, as unselfish and completely pure and devotional. So Krishna is so wonderful. We want to get that as the bottom line, that somehow or other from wherever else, whatever other information is there, we want to directly and specifically remember Krishna is so wonderful that he's working in everyone's life, and it says, don't doubt that the Lord won't complete the good work he's begun in you.
Well said. Very well said.
Glory to Prabhupada. We're just repeating Prabhupada.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other reflections or comments or criticisms?
Hi, Krishna Prabhu.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the class. I had a question in reference to when we were talking about karma kanda. I've heard modern religions being compared to that, but at the same time, modern religions aren't necessarily, have sort of broken away from are breakaways from the Vedic tradition. if I've understood that correctly. So are we kind of like being nice, calling it karma kanda? You know, are modern religions really kind of far off from that, but it's the closest kind of comparison that we have?
Well, you asked a very good question. Um, um, that's can't give a simple answer, but I'll see what I can do. I thought about this a lot growing up. I studied comparative religion. I spent my teenage years basically in the forest trying to understanding what death is and exploring religions. I had an unusual childhood that way. And then when I met Prabhupada, I asked him these same questions that you're asking. And because I really wanted to know that answer. And every religion, or almost every religion, maybe there's some weird things out there. I mean, I don't think QAnon takes us closer to anything positive, but some people
They might say differently.
they certainly would. And but these things exist out there. And so people can just make up nonsense, that's allowed. But all the religious traditions have a certain commonality. When Anuttama does his interreligious programs, we see great realizations. One of fellows I know very well is a Jesuit priest, Francis Clooney, as the highest ranking chair at Harvard Divinity. And he studies the South Indian Vaishnav tradition. And basically, he's a devotee in the guise of a monk, Christian monk, very devotional, so every religion I've come across has the spiritual truths in it. And every religion has those who can abuse the spiritual truth, and every religion has fanatics in it. Now, Prabhupada said, religion without philosophy is sentiment, or in worse, fanaticism. So I find fanatics among Hindus, quite a few nowadays with the Hindutva movement. We find fanatics among Hare Krishnas, and we find fanatics among the Jewish groups in just nearby the Bhakti Center in Brooklyn. They just had a funeral for one of their grand rabbis died. And thousands were elbow to elbow packed together without masks to celebrate in the middle of a pandemic. That's really stupid. I mean, everyone should know better. When I was in Israel a few years back, they had such a terrible incident. Even the right-wing government had to condemn it. A Orthodox Jewish girl was walking through an ultra-Orthodox Jewish neighborhood. And because she was going to school, and girls should learn at home, they shouldn't go to school, the ultra-Orthodox said. The ultra-Orthodox were throwing stones at a 10-year-old ultra-Orthodox girl who was in a school uniform walking through their neighborhood. Horrible. So that is called religion without philosophy. So that's condemnable. Philosophy without religion, Prabhupada said, is the opposite. It's just speculation. It's useless. Oh, you just talk philosophy, but don't do anything. You don't practice anything. You just talk it. So every religion has some truth in it. Every religion I've examined has some mode of goodness, truth in it. And every religion has practitioners who are in a mode of passion. They really want something. Oh, what can I get out of it? I want to get something from it. What's my reward? That's religion, a mode of passion. And every religion has religion in a mode of ignorance, which the baser tendencies come up, fanaticism. Every religion has their jihadists. I mean, Jews have their jihadists, Christians have it, Muslims. If we go back to, let's say, the time of the Inquisition, the time of Columbus, let's say, who were the civilized people in Spain then? Just before the time of Columbus, it was the Muslims. They had all the great universities. They had they had Jewish scholars, Christian scholars. They treated them all equally, gave them all great facility. They preserved the great works of antiquity from the Greeks. It was a wonderful system. And then the Christians took over Spain and did the Inquisition, in which no matter what if you admitted that you were a heathen, you were killed. And if you didn't admit you were a heathen, you were a liar, so you were killed. Called lose-lose. It was horrible, the Inquisition. And the Christians were the fanatics and the Muslims were the good guys. Nowadays, we have this image of the Muslims being the fanatics, so not all are, just some are, and the Christians being the good guys, so they can be quite fanatic. And I've met extremely fanatical Hare Krishnas. I mean, there's always, Prabhupada talked about this fanaticism everywhere. So every religion has some truth, and every religion has those who are in goodness, passion, and extreme ignorance. So what attracted me to Prabhupada is he was in pure goodness. I could see that being with him. And Prabhupada told me just associate with those who are similarly like-minded. So in my personal life, I try to associate with those who are really in goodness. And sometimes these people are Hare Krishnas, sometimes they might not be. I may be friendly with people of all walks of life, but those who I reveal my mind to, who I can really associate deeply with, I want them to be spiritually advanced so I could bring myself up. Does that answer your question, Daniel?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Good question. I could go on and on for a whole day seminar on that one. So I just gave you the shortest brief answer. We have time maybe for one more. There's Radha Murali Darsh, offer all respects. Is there one more question, comment, criticism, reflection? We'll see. Hi, Paula. I see you there now. Nice to see you. Very good.
We love you.
I wanted to share a reflection on the class.
Sure.
On the point of devotional service, I noticed that something as simple as washing dishes, I would do before with the hopes that my dad's wife would be like, "Oh, look, she's a good girl." But once I changed the direction of my actions to Krishna, I'm doing this for you, it just brings you can see a shift in your consciousness personally, because I feel like I'm not doing it for recognition. I'm actually doing it to serve Krishna. And I think that it satisfies him because it's like, okay, another soul is trying to please me and it's exactly what he wants. So I feel like just having that mindset of devotional service is a real game changer.
That's a very, very deep realization that if we do things in relation to Krishna, everything changes. Prabhupada gave this simple example repeatedly, and it was this: a bunch of zeros are zeros. You put a 1 in front of it, it has value. Put 1 in front of 6, behind 6 zeros, it's a million value, which in rupees isn't very much, but in dollars, that can go a long way. So the zeros need the 1. And so things in relation to Krishna. When I was first with the devotees and I was engaged to be married, and Prabhupada I was thinking, oh my, I have to give up all my plans. And Prabhupada said, no, why are you thinking like that? You just have to add Krishna. When you add Krishna, everything becomes purified. And we start rising above karma kanda. And even karma kanda if I'm thinking, oh, Krishna will fulfill my desires, it's not the highest good, but at least it's a step in the right direction. And if we continue, we'll eventually rise above that. But the danger of that is when you approach Krishna to fill your desires, you don't get filled. You're not very advanced. You're not very philosophically strong. And then the first time Krishna doesn't fulfill your desire, you say, oh, there is no Krishna. It's not very advanced, very immature. But you have to be immature before you can be mature. So I don't condemn someone for that, but I say it may be even necessary, but not nearly sufficient. With that, we'll stop here. Thank you all very much. I hope those of you who are in New York, I hope that you can keep very warm today because it's a little difficult there. I won't even talk about the temperature where I am. I won't rub in that it's 50 degrees and getting warmer. I won't even mention that. I just wouldn't do that. But anyway, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.